Okay, so the last feature we want to look at is something called pivot tables, which is an extremely powerful tool in Excel. And this is really good for collating results, especially if you have maybe 5 or 6 tests or more, and you want to get average results and sort of track how students are doing. And I think this is quite powerful. So I'm going to start off by selecting a table. So what I've done again is I've got the same table of students, same fictitious results. I again updated the grades to numbering grades because I just think it's easier to analyze and get an average from. And I'm going to select the table, and I'm going to say that I want to create a pivot table. So I'm going to click on data, and I'm going to click on insert, and then I'm going to click on pivot table. Okay, so I've got my range. I'm going to put it onto a new worksheet, so it will open up a new worksheet. There we are. And then here, oh whoops, if I could, yeah, okay, I've just resized my window so you can see it a bit better. So here, where it's created a pivot table, at the moment it looks very blank. What we want is we want to say what our columns and what our rows will be. So, okay, so from my pivot table now, what I could say is that I would like to have my students, and my students I want them to be in rows, so the names of my students are in rows. And what I'd like to say is I want to see their scores, but we don't want a sum of their scores. I'm going to say if I click onto value field settings and change that to an average, so I get their average scores based on however many tests they do. And I want the same for the grade. Oops, and again, let's put that in rows. So we want to move that from rows, we want that to values, and it's giving me a count, so I want to change that to, I'm going to change that to an average as well. So now I know, and if I could just highlight that, and let's remove all those decimal places. There we are. So average grade, let's say if I wanted to have one, average grade for this student is, let's say 5.3, average score is a 12, and maybe what I could do is add the number of tests, so I can say test. So instead of saying the sum of tests, I could say number of tests taken, which would be, it shouldn't be that, it should be, I believe, a count. There we are. So from 4 tests, average grade is 12, average grade is 5, average score is 12, and the count, there's 4 tests taken. Okay, so you may be wondering where pivot tables could be really useful. So what I've done is I've used a spreadsheet which I use with my students, and I've hidden anything that can really identify them. And basically, I'm just going to point out how I use it. So for me, it's really powerful because for example, Year 11 students and for my Year 13 students, what I tend to do is give them past paper questions every week. And then what I do is I look at the exam syllabus and the topics in the exam, and I split them into different categories. So for example, in computing, one category might be algorithms, another one might be programming, computer systems, security, networking, data representation, and then I can, with each test I give the students based on random topics, I can say overall, let's say in a year, if they've done 30 tests for me, I can see which topics they're stronger and weaker at. So I can point out to students and say, okay, look, this student, for example, 50% of the questions he's answered on algorithms, and if that's 20 questions, or if that's 20 papers covered, and maybe 10 of them have got algorithm questions, he knows he's got 50% of them right. So I can then tell him, and he can inform himself. He can inform his own planning when it comes to his revision, and he can say, right, I could do better with algorithms, so I could focus more revision on that. Or, for example, there's a student who hasn't achieved very well when it comes to, so let's say, security. One student here has achieved 38%. He's fairly good in other topics, so 69% computer systems, 75% data representation. But let's say over 20 tests, or however many we do, if he sees that he's weaker on some topics, then as well as the extra revision I give him, then he can focus his own revision, and it can help him inform himself on what topics he needs to focus more on. So so it's quite a powerful thing. So then I could say, for example, average grade, these students have got over however many tests. I can say average grade, for example, is a 7 and a target is an 8. And in the same way I did it before, I've used conditional formatting to let me know in this column how far they are away from their targets. And so for me and for my students, using pivot tables has been extremely powerful. And it's a great way to help me when it comes to planning and knowing what to target them. So for example, if I can see that everyone in the class has got done really bad with security questions over the past 5 or 6 times that topic has come up in test papers, then I can start planning lessons on security more. And if I can see that, for example, right, everyone's very good at data representation, everyone hits 60 or above, and so forth. And what I could really do if I wanted to is I could say I could put conditional formatting on every single cell to calculate where they are in terms of where the target grade is. So if their target grade is a 7 and this student, for example, is hitting 70% or 75%, then it could inform them for each topic what they're doing not so well in when it comes to target grade on average. So yeah, that could be a really useful tool and really powerful to help myself and my students determine what they want to focus their efforts on when it comes to revision next and lesson planning.